Rain tapped slow against the windows of Red Line Bar, tracing thin silver streaks through the neon glow. Inside, the air carried the usual mix: old beer engine grease and the faint bite of cedar smoke drifting from Bull's jacket. The jukebox sputtered through a classic rock track that had been dying for 20 years. Dale liked that kind of noise. Predictable. Background. Something to rest his thoughts on. He was halfway through a beer when the door slammed open. It wasn't slammed by a man or a drunk or a storm gust. It was slammed by a barefoot kid. The boy stumbled in skin streaked with dirt and rain hair matted to his forehead. Blood dark drying smeared across his shirt like someone had pressed hands against him and dragged down. He stood in the doorway, breathing like the air-hurt chest, heaving eyes wide enough to show the whites in the dim light. No one in the bar moved at first. Not out of coldness, just honest confusion. Kids never walked in here. They especially didn't run into the place crying. The cue ball froze under Bull's palm. Ryder lowered his beer. Jessie's thumb hovered over her phone but didn't press, not yet. The kid's gaze found Dale like he recognized something steady. "Please," the boy choked out. "You gotta come. You gotta come now." The way he said it, raw, broken at the edges, grabbed something behind Dale's ribs. He set his beer down and stood. Not fast, not dramatic, just certain. Dale walked toward him, boots hitting the wooden floor soft and heavy. Up close he saw the details: toe-scuffed feet, mud still wet on the ankles, a small tremor in the thin arms. The blood prints across the shirt weren't from a wound on the kid, they were someone else's. The boy reached out and grabbed Dale's jacket sleeve with both hands, fingers shaking. "They're hurting her," he whispered. They locked the door. "Please." That was all it took, Ryder, Dale said. Engines answered before Ryder did. Chairs scraped. Jackets snapped off hooks. Every hawk in the room moved at once, muscle memory as old as their friendship. In less than 10 seconds, the bar emptied into the wet dark. No one finished drinks. No one asked questions. Outside, the rain had softened to a cold mist. The road glistened black and slick, reflecting the orange streetlights like fire trapped under glass. 5 bikes roared awake, deep engines pounding through the quiet street. Ryder swung the kid behind him on the bike. The boy, Levi, he managed between gasps, wrapped thin arms around Ryder's waist. His voice shook as he pointed left, down the hill. White trailer, red door. They rode hard but clean wheels, throwing arcs of water into the night. Dale led the pack, headlights slicing through fog. Houses thinned out into scrubland and sagging fences. Distance made the world colder. When they reached the trailer, the silence hit first. Not a dog bark, not a porch light, not even a TV glow leaking through curtains. Just a yard full of wet dirt and a stillness that felt wrong. The trailer's windows were blacked out with nailed curtains and foil. The front door was red once, now chipped with a heavy chain looped through the handle. Dale's shoulders tightened beneath his jacket. Too quiet, too hidden. Bull tested the knob. Locked. Hard. Jessie moved along the side boot, sinking in mud. She tugged on one of the nailed curtains. It didn't budge. From inside came only the slow drip of last night's storm slipping off the roof. And then a sound. Soft, muffled, not a scream, someone trying desperately not to scream. Dale didn't need to speak. Bull braced, one boot shouldered the door, and the rotten frame shattered inward, with a crack like splitting bone. Inside smelled of mildew, sweat, and something sourer: fear left too long in a closed space. The kitchen light flickered weakly overhead, casting the room in a sickly yellow. Sherry lay on the floor. Her hair clung to her skin cheek, swollen purple breath shallow. A broken chair leg lay beside her, pill bottles scattered near the sink. The room looked like a storm had passed through one that hit only her. Levi dropped to his knees beside her, the slap of skin against linoleum echoing in the cramped space. "Mom," he cried, voice breaking. "Mom, I'm here." Ryder checked her pulse. "Alive," he said, relief dropped soft as a whisper. Dale took in the rest-scuffed walls, overturned furniture, blood smears. He moved slow, careful not to disturb anything. Evidence mattered even on nights like this. A photo frame lay face down on the floor. Dale picked it up. A family picture. Sherry Levi and a man with a too-tight smile. "Where is he?" Dale asked Levi. The boy shook his head hard. "He left. Said not to tell." The words said one thing. The look in his eyes said another. He might be close. He might come back. Jesse dialed the sheriff voice. Clipped. Domestic. Severe. Need medics now. They stayed until the ambulance came, rain dripping from their jackets onto the floor, engines idling outside like guard dogs. Paramedics lifted Sherry onto a stretcher. Levi refused to let go of her hand until one gently coaxed him aside. Half the town watched from windows, silhouettes behind glass. No one stepped out. No one offered a blanket or a voice. Only one old man on a porch muttered, "About damn time somebody did something," then disappeared inside. The ambulance rolled off, lights cutting through the darkness. Dale stood at the edge of the porch watching the tail lights fade, the night settling around them again. Engines rumbled behind him as the Hawks mounted up, quiet, controlled, ready. Not for thanks, not for glory, for the kid who ran barefoot into a bar, for the woman who hadn't stood a chance, for the town that didn't stand at all. Dale pulled on his gloves. The road waited. And Dale listened, because trouble never ended where it began. He revved the engine once. Then the Hawks rode into the night. Morning came in sideways through dusty blinds, turning the garage into stripes of light and shadow. Dale stood over an open engine block, not really seeing it. His hands moved on habit, socket, bolt, torque, while his head stayed somewhere else entirely. The bar's back door creaked. Hila stepped in, still wearing her diner apron, hair tied up, face a little paler than usual. She held her phone between two fingers, like it was something that might blow. "You seen this yet?" she asked. Dale wiped his hands on a rag and took the phone. The screen showed a paused security feed, black and white fisheye, angle, the grainy kind of footage that never made anything look heroic. "Hit play," Hila said. He did. The clip was short. 30 seconds, a hospital corridor from high above. A kid sprinting into frame. A door banging open. Shadows in leather flooding a room, then fighting their way back out, carrying a limp shape. Soundless, but you didn't need audio. The panic was in the way the boy's feet slid on the tile, in the way one of the bikers shoved the door so hard it bounced off the stopper. No faces clear, no names, just motion and intent. In the corner, a counter ticked upward, views, changing faster than Dale's eyes could track. "Tech at the hospital leaked it," Hila said quietly. "Posted it and tried to pull it down when somebody yelled, 'Too late.'" Comments crawled under the video, line after line. "Find these guys. Real heroes don't wear capes. They ride Harleys. Angels in denim. Name the bar. I'm buying the house around." A new one popped in while he watched. "If no one helps, ask the Hawks." He hated that. Not the praise, the weight. Dale's thumb hovered over the screen. It wasn't the rescue that bothered him. It was how small it looked, cut down to a clip with a song laid over it, turned into entertainment. "What else is out there?" he asked. "Three mirrors of that video. A slowed down one. A compilation of biker heroes," Isla said. "And now reporters. You got two messages on the bar phone already. One from Austin." As if on cue, Rain walked in from the side door, hoodie up, laptop hugged against her ribs. She didn't bother saying hi, just leaned on the counter beside him and squinted at the phone. "They cropped out the timestamps," she said, sloppy. Her fingers tapped the bar edge, counting off something in her head only she knew. What Travis Burke never figures out is that Rain quietly saves every plate timestamp and camera scrap from their rescues on drives the state doesn't know exist. Dale glanced at her. "Can you pull the original?" she snorted. "Already did. Along with who shared it, who boosted it, and which station is asking the hospital for exclusive rights." She jerked her chin toward the garage bay. "And you've got a drone outside, by the way. Top of the hour news loves their aerials." Through the open bay door he could hear it now, a tiny needling whine somewhere above the power lines. Dale handed Isla back her phone. "Round everyone up," he said. "Back of the shop." The alley behind the garage smelled like oil, wet cardboard, and the faint sweetness of something rotting in the dumpster down the block. It was the only place left in town that didn't feel like it had eyes on it. Bull leaned against the cinder block wall, arms crossed. Ryder sat on an empty milk crate helmet at his feet. Jesse paced, throwing glances toward the street. Rain perched on an upside-down bucket, typing one-handed on her laptop screen, brightness turned low. "Reporters are circling," Jesse said. One already tried to stick a mic in Levi's face at the clinic. Isla nearly broke it off her arm. Bull grunted. "We can run 'em off and look like exactly what they want us to be," Dale asked. He shook his head. "No. They watched him the way they always did when the road got weird. We're not giving them a show," he said. "No interviews, no posing. We got nothing to hide, but everything to protect." Rain finished, not looking up. Dale nodded once. "Sherry, Levi, anyone else who finds us because of this, they don't get to turn those people into B-roll." Ryder frowned. "What about the mayor?" He called the bar twice. "Wants you at council tonight. Says it'll look good if you stand with him." "Since when has he stood with us?" Jesse muttered. Dale let the question hang. Somewhere beyond the alley, a car horn blared, followed by the faint buzz of that drone again. "They're gonna tell this story with or without us," he said. "We decide how much of us they get." Rain finally glanced up. "They already named you," she said. "Someone recognized your jacket. Comment sections calling you Hawks." "We didn't pick that," Bull said. "Doesn't matter who did," Dale replied. "What matters is what they do with it." He looked at each of them, reading the mixed anger in Bull's set jaw, wary amusement in Ryder's lopsided smile, Jesse's restless shoulders, Rain's sharp focus. "We don't run," he said. "But we don't dance for them either." Town Hall that night glowed two bright fluorescent lights buzzing loud enough to grate on teeth. The room smelled like old coffee dust and the damp wool of coats shaken out at the door. Folding chairs lined every row, packed with townspeople who normally avoided meetings like bad weather. Phones were out, cameras ready. A local station had set up a tripod at the back, red light winking. Dale stood just off to the side of the podium, feeling the weight of his jacket more than usual. The Hawks sat scattered in the front row, clean leathers. No attitude, just presence. The mayor cleared his throat into the mic, smile a little too wide. "We've all seen the video," he began. "We all know what these fine gentlemen did." Dale heard the tremor under fine. The man was gambling lean too hard in either direction, and he'd lose someone. The speech went on longer than it needed to, phrases like community spirit and stepping up floating past. Dale kept his eyes on the back wall clock. The second hand dragged, and I think the mayor said, "Finally, it's only right we hear from the man who," he gestured toward Dale, led that effort. Phones rose like a tide as Dale stepped up to the microphone. The podium wood was sticky against his knuckles. The lights were hot on his face. Somewhere a baby fussed. Somewhere else a chair creaked. He didn't do speeches. He did engines and road and people bleeding in the wrong rooms. But he also knew silence could be a story if you let the wrong people write it. He leaned in just enough for his voice to carry. "We don't fight for fame," Dale said. "We fight so others don't have to." 10 words. That was all. He stepped back before applause, had time to decide what it wanted to be. The sound came anyway, uneven, scattered, but real enough. As he walked past the camera, he caught his reflection in its black glass, just another man in a jacket caught in a frame he hadn't asked for. Rain waited for him by the door, laptop bag slung over her shoulder. "They're already clipping that line," she said. "Give it an hour, it'll be a caption." Dale pushed open the exit into the cool air, the noise of the hall spilling out behind him, then fading as the door shut. Let them clip it, he thought. Here, outside, the night was big and quiet again. Out here, nobody needed speeches. Out here, the road still answered to need not to views. Night had settled heavy over the town, thick with the smell of wet asphalt and fryer grease drifting from the diner vents. Dale was locking the shop's front gate when he saw Isla step out of the alley behind the diner, moving fast, shoulders tight beneath her coat. She wasn't carrying food bins or trash bags, just urgency. "Need you a second," she called, voice low. Dale followed her through the alley. The dumpsters loomed in the shadows, metal slick from the evening drizzle. Isla stopped beside the far bin and shifted her weight, not wanting to startle whoever was huddled behind it. A girl, curled, small blanket wrapped so tight it pinched at her shoulders, face half hidden by her hair. Rain plastered it across her cheek. Her high tops were soaked through. When Isla crouched beside her, the girl didn't pull back, but she didn't look up either. "Found her an hour ago," Isla murmured. "Said she was just resting." "That's not resting." Dale stepped closer, boots slow on the wet concrete. "Hey," he said gently. "Cold night to be out here." The girl's breath hitched. She kept her gaze on the ground. Isla held out a hand. "Come on. Let's get you warm." Inside the garage office, the space smelled of engine oil, coffee, and rain-soaked denim hung to dry. Dale flicked on the desk lamp. Warm yellow light filled the room. The girl perched on the edge of the chair like she was expecting it to vanish. Isla handed her a mug, chipped, steaming. She wrapped her fingers around it instantly, the heat making her shoulders drop a fraction. "What's your name?" Dale asked. "Candace." "Quiet. Thin. How old?" 16. Her voice cracked on the second syllable like it hadn't been used for truth in a long time. Jessie appeared in the doorway, hair still tied back from her late shift. She took one look at the girl and stepped fully inside, slipping onto the stool across from her. "You safe now," Jessie said softly. "Start there." Candace blinked, hard jaw working. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then barely audible. "My stepdad said, if I told, I'd disappear like my brother." The words landed like something cold, dropped straight into the room's center. Jessie froze mid-breath. Ila's grip tightened around the coffee mug she was still holding. Dale felt the old familiar pressure coil in his ribs, the kind that didn't need explanation, didn't need permission. "Does he know you're gone?" Dale asked. Candace nodded, once a tiny, terrified dip of her chin. "He was drunk. Passed out. I left." Dale reached into the drawer, pulled out a napkin and a pen, set them gently on the desk. "Write his name," he said. She hesitated. Then her hand moved. Rain slipped in quietly, hoodie up, laptop already waking in her arms. One look at the name on the napkin, and she sat on the floor back against the filing cabinet, fingers flying on the keys. "Truck stop chatter says he's working construction 2 counties over," she said after barely a minute. "Goes by a different last name on the roster. Likes to drink after shift. No criminal record. At least not one that stuck." "Any address?" Dale asked. "One that might match." Rain turned the laptop toward him, a site with a plywood wall and a scattering of parked machinery. "Shifts run late. They left before anyone talked themselves out of it." The construction site sat on the far edge of a county line, floodlights buzzing overhead like giant insects. The smell of wet cement and diesel hung heavy. Crickets chirped from the brush, a thin soundtrack to the steady drip of runoff from unfinished roofing. The man sat alone at a folding table outside a half-built structure, boots kicked up, drinking something brown from a plastic cup. His hair was slick with sweat, features hard with the smug calm of someone who'd never expected consequences. Dale walked up first. Ryder and Bull flanked him. Jessie stood behind, hands in her jacket pockets, but eyes sharp. The man squinted up at them, smile lifting slow wrong in a way no amount of light could soften. "You remember Candace?" Dale asked. The smile twitched. He lowered his cup an inch. "Who are you supposed to be?" the man said. The fairy tale squad rider stepped forward, not touching, just close enough that the man's smirk curdled. "I said," Dale repeated. "Do you remember?" Candace's silence stretched. The man lifted the cup again, shrugging. "Kids lie," he said. "Teenagers lie more." "Pour it out," Dale said. "Why?" Bull flicked the table with one massive hand. It toppled, cup splashing into the dirt. The man jolted. Not from the hit, no one had touched him, but from the realization that he wasn't insulated by distance anymore. Dale didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Your wall," he said, nodding behind the man. Pinned to plywood were photographs, missing kids, old flyers, some blurred, some curled at the corners. A cluster of faces forgotten by everyone except those who stayed up at night, wondering where the wrong turn had been, Candace's brother among them. The man's eyes flicked to the wall, and whatever excuse he'd rehearsed died on his tongue. His knees hit the dirt before anyone told him to kneel. His hands shook so hard the veins stood out. "I didn't," he stammered. "I didn't. I lost control sometimes. That's the problem," Jessie said, voice flat. "You don't get to lose control with kids." Sirens echoed faint in the distance. Someone must have called, maybe a worker, seeing the lights from the highway. Maybe rain sending something quietly. The man sank lower, sobbing into his palms. Dale didn't touch him, didn't speak. Just let the night hold the truth tight around them. They left when the patrol lights came into view, their engines echoing off steel beams as they rode back into dark. Dale was sweeping the shop floor later that night when the window shattered. Glass burst inward in a sharp, crystalline crash. He turned, arm already up. A brick rolled across the concrete and hit a jack stand with a hollow clack. Bull rushed in from the back, eyes scanning for movement. No one. Just the cold air through the broken pane and the smell of rain on dust. Dale knelt and picked up the brick. A note was taped around it, paper damp but legible. "Stay out of things that don't concern you." He turned it over, once expression unreadable. Then he set the brick on the counter beside the parts catalog like it was just another piece waiting to be fixed. Because he'd seen enough nights like this to know one thing: someone always tried to scare you off right before the real trouble showed its teeth. Morning arrived with a strange kind of tension, like the town had woken up early to watch something go wrong. Dale felt it before he saw it. The first health inspector showed up at Ila's diner right after breakfast rush. Clipboard, camera, phone, a smile too, rehearsed to be friendly. He walked in with the authority of a man who'd been told to find something, even if he had to invent it. Ela called Dale after the inspector started photographing the inside of her walk-in freezer. "Routine check," the man insisted, voice cracking slightly, when Jesse leaned across the counter to grab a coffee pot behind him. By evening, a second inspector arrived, this one with a photographer already snapping pictures before the man even introduced himself. "Routine," he repeated. Dale didn't like routines. He liked patterns, and this one was ugly. Subpoenas came the next day. One slid under the garage door before sunrise. Dale found it lying on the oil-stained floor like a dead thing. Another taped to the diner's back entrance. Ryder got served at the gas station while refueling his bike. Bull ripped his in half instinctively before the server even explained what it was. Jessie folded hers into a paper plane, flicked it into the wind, and walked away. But Dale read his. Twice. Allegations of unlawful detainment, it said. Interference with state investigation. Endangering individuals through unlicensed intervention. Long phrases written by someone who'd never stood in a kitchen with a bleeding woman or knelt on a motel carpet beside a shaking child. He struck a match and let the paper burn down to nothing on the concrete. Ash didn't lie. Paper did. Late that night, after the last bike rolled out, a plain envelope appeared in the diner's mail slot. No postage, no return address. Nothing but 3 words on the front. To the Hawks. Dale, Jesse, and Isla gathered at a corner booth. The diner was quiet, only the sound of the fridge humming and the faint buzz of the neon open sign bleeding blue light across the room. Dale opened the envelope. A single photo slid onto the table. A boy, maybe 10, stared into the camera. Bruises under both eyes. An arm in a cast. Hair unwashed. He held a cardboard sign with shaky handwriting. "I want to go home." No location. No name. No context. Rain arrived seconds later, pulled in by the urgency that hung in the room like static. She studied the photo, squinting at the background. "Chain-link fence," she murmured, tracing a finger along the blurred metal. "That's a motel lot. Cheap one. Sun angle says southwest. Parking lines old, not repainted." She pulled out her laptop, fingers flying. "There are 3 discount motels that match," she said. One abandoned, one with too many drug calls, one with 2 police reports this week, both dropped before officers arrived. They already knew which one to check first. The motel sat on a stretch of highway that never slept, lit by flickering neon and half-dead bulbs buzzing like insects. The air smelled of stale cigarettes and damp carpet. Dale knocked on the manager's door. A tired man answered, wearing slippers and a shirt with a mustard stain. "You ever seen this boy?" Dale asked, showing the photo. The manager squinted. "Looks like one of the foster kids. Family comes through every few months. Says she's the aunt. Kids change. Stories don't." "You got names?" Jesse asked. "Cash only," he muttered. "They don't leave much to track." They didn't wait. Room 12 answered after 3 knocks. The door cracked open to reveal a woman with a brittle smile and cigarette breath. "Can I help you?" she asked too sweetly. Behind her, two kids sat on the edge of the bed. One was the boy, eyes wide and frozen. The other, a girl, even younger, clutched a blanket like it was armor. "Ma'am," Jessie said calmly, "I need you to step outside. I don't know who you think you—" Bull stepped into the doorway, filling it completely. Not threatening, just undeniable. The woman moved. Inside, the air was heavy with something sour, fear, stale smoke, and motel disinfectant that never quite worked. The kids didn't speak. Dale kneeled in front of the boy. "You're safe," he said. "You're not going anywhere you don't want to." The boy didn't answer. He just reached under the mattress and pulled out a small, battered notebook. He handed it to Dale with both hands, chin trembling. Inside were pages filled with neat, childish handwriting, names, dates, towns, aunts and uncles, places they'd been dropped off, houses they'd been pulled from every time they'd been moved like luggage. It wasn't just a record. It was a ledger of pain. Rain scanned the pages quickly, eyes sharp. "This matches 3 missing person logs," she whispered, "and 1 internal note from CPS that never made a file." Dale closed the notebook gently, as if it might bruise under rough handling. "Let's get them out," he said. By nightfall, the diner's back room was a temporary shelter. Sherry drove the kids to an agency office herself, slamming the notebook down in front of a caseworker whose face drained of color as she flipped through the pages. Phones rang, files opened. Doors that had stayed shut for too long were suddenly very interested in cooperating. Outside, the first real quiet of the night settled over the town. But it wasn't peace. Not yet. Dale stepped back into the garage, the smell of coolant and metal grounding him. The brick from earlier still sat on the counter. He'd left it there deliberately. The note around it had dried stiff. "Stay out of things that don't concern you." He touched the edge of the paper with one finger, eyes narrowing. People only wrote threats like that when they were scared. And scared people made mistakes. The kind you could follow. The town council building looked different at night, like it had been polished for company, though everyone knew it had only ever been cleaned for emergencies and photo ops. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile white across the foyer. People pressed into the room shoulder to shoulder, breath-thick coats damp from a slow drizzle outside. Dale stepped in first. The shift in the crowd was immediate. A hush, a ripple, then a wave of phones lifting screens glowing like a field of cold fireflies. Rider Jesse Bull Rain followed him in boots, thudding on the old linoleum. They took their seats in the front row, clean jackets, no patches, no swagger. Just presence. The mayor stood at the podium, adjusting his tie with sweaty fingers. He offered a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Thank you for coming," he said to the room, though his gaze kept flicking nervously toward Dale, as if expecting him to start a riot. Beside the mayor stood a woman in a tailored gray suit, briefcase at her feet. She looked out over the crowd like she was scanning for faulty equipment. Her badge lanyard identified her as a representative from the district attorney's office. "Tonight," she began, "we're here to address several serious concerns brought to our attention regarding unauthorized interventions by a local motorcycle group." A murmur rippled across the audience. Rain shifted in her seat, jaw tightening. Ryder exhaled through his nose. Bull sat stone still. The woman clicked her tablet, projecting images onto the council's old screen, grainy stills of leather jackets outside the motel, blurred frames from the construction yard, a freeze frame of daylight catching on Bull's shoulder as he stepped through a doorway. "These actions," she continued, voice clipped and precise, "constitute potential harassment, unlawful detainment, and interference with ongoing state-level investigations. We are concerned about a pattern. There it was. The word they always used when they didn't want to say truth. Dale didn't move, didn't blink. But Jesse saw the way his knuckles tightened slightly on his knees. The woman tapped her tablet again. This town must understand that vigilante behavior, no matter how well-intentioned, creates legal liability, creates safety, someone whispered in the back. The woman's eyes narrowed, but she continued. Law must be executed by authorized officials, not self-appointed groups. Rain smirked faintly. Jesse elbowed her gently, a reminder to keep still. When the woman finally paused, the mayor looked relieved, as if he'd expected worse. "Thank you," he said. "We open the floor for response." Dale stood. The room quieted instantly. Leather creaked softly as he reached inside his coat and pulled out a thick folder, heavy, worn at the edges, rubber-banded tight. He walked it to the long council table, boots echoing on the floor. He set it down with a soft, definitive thud. "Here's our pattern," he said. The DA's rep blinked. "Excuse me." Dale opened the folder. The first page was a statement signed by Sherry Agency, timestamp at the bottom. The next, Candace's written account. Behind that, 3 anonymized letters from people the crew had helped quietly. Then photocopies of the boys' motel ledger, every page stamped with "received" by 2 different child welfare officers. Rain had highlighted the dates in clean yellow marks. "These people asked for help," Dale said. "We answered." The woman's lips pressed thin. "This doesn't change the legality, it changes the truth," Dale said softly. He slid another document across the table, a copy of an agency email acknowledging delayed investigations. Then photos time-stamped of the motel room where the boy had been found. A scanned police log with no available units circled in red. Another, with no action taken. People in the room leaned forward as if drawn. The DA's rep reached for the pages but hesitated the instant her fingers touched them, as though they were heavier than they looked. "You're presenting evidence out of procedure," she said stiffly. "You're ignoring things out of convenience," Dale replied. Her jaw twitched. Behind Dale, Ryder leaned toward Jesse, whispering, "She's losing her footing." Jessie didn't smile, but the corner of her eyes softened in agreement. Dale closed the folder and stepped back from the table. "This town doesn't need speeches," he said. "It needs someone to pick up the phone when people call for help. If that's you, great. If it's not, we won't apologize for stepping in." Silence stretched, tense, brittle. Then a clatter broke it. Someone's chair scraped back. Another followed. Then soft applause. A hesitant start that grew not thunderous, not showy, but steady. Real. The DA's rep stood stone-still, eyes darting across the room. She gathered her papers quickly, jaw tight, pride wounded. "Will, review these materials," she said stiffly. Dale nodded once. "You do that." He walked out of the room before anyone could turn the applause into a scene. Cool night air hit him the moment he stepped outside. It smelled like rain carried on wind, like wet gravel newly disturbed. Dale breathed it in, grounding himself. Behind him, Ryder and Bull trailed out, Jesse close after. Rain lingered near the doorway, watching the crowd through the glass faces lit by phone screens, arguments brewing among neighbors, lines being drawn without anyone meaning to draw them. "Think she'll come after us harder?" Ryder asked, helmet under his arm. "Maybe," Dale said. "Depends how much truth scares her." Bull grunted. "Should scare her a lot." Rain closed her laptop bag, stepped onto the sidewalk beside them. "That line you said," she murmured, "about answering when others didn't, it's trending." Dale didn't answer. He was looking across the street. A lone man stood under a failing street lamp coat, buttoned high binoculars lowered. The man took a still photo, then slid the camera into a worn briefcase. His posture was too stiff for a reporter, too clean. When he turned away, a badge glinted briefly inside his jacket. Dale watched him disappear into the dark. "Who was that?" Jesse asked. "Someone taking notes," Dale said. He didn't raise his voice, didn't change his stance, but the tension around him shifted, coiled tighter, sharper. The kind of shift that meant things were changing again, and the next storm wouldn't come with sirens. It would come quiet, like footsteps in a hallway no one else heard. Rain didn't show up for morning rounds. That alone meant nothing. She ran late sometimes, especially after nights buried in code. But by noon, Jessie was pacing the length of the garage, eyes flicking to her phone every few seconds. Ryder tried calling twice. Bull drove by her trailer. No answer. Lights on. Keys on the hook. Coffee still steaming in the mug beside her laptop. That was wrong. Dale felt the wrongness deeper than the others. Rain never left without leaving breadcrumbs. Small signs, careful signals, digital trails subtle as footprints under starlight. But today there was nothing, a silence that felt engineered. He stepped outside into the brittle quiet of the midday air. The sky was overcast, thick, with the smell of an incoming storm, metallic, old, heavy. He listened not for noise, but for absence. 1 hour, he said. Start tracing. Rain's phone pinged last on Highway 77, a rest stop where truckers parked for naps and teenagers smoked in the far lot. Dust collected on the concrete in thin waves. A crushed soda can rolled lazily in the wind. Jessie found the tire marks first, a skid pattern that didn't match any local car. Ryder crouched beside the curb, fingertips brushing over broken plastic. "A phone case," he murmured. "Her brand." Bull checked the restroom. Dale followed. Inside smelled of bleach and stagnation. Flickering fluorescent bulbs cast harsh white against the cracked tile. On the floor near the sink, a smear of dried blood clung to the grout, small, thin, like someone had tried to wipe it away fast. "She wouldn't go easy," Bull said. No, Dale replied. She didn't. He touched the counter fingertips, finding a faint scuff rubber from a gloved hand. The kind used by people who didn't want to leave prints. Outside, Jessie held up a scrap of paper. It fluttered in the wind, just an ad ripped from a bulletin board, but the edge carried a crease pattern Rain used when she didn't want to speak out loud. A signal. They followed the clue. The truck stop cameras were old, low-resolution, half-blinded by decades of dust. But Evelyn, who'd grown into an unshakable ally, pulled every frame anyway, stitching the footage manually. There she said, stopping at a grainy freeze frame. A van, no plates, tinted windows, sliding door closing with a sharp jerk. And just for a fraction of a second, Rain's boot caught in the edge of the shot, one foot lifted as she twisted, resisting. Evelyn zoomed in until the pixels blurred. Jessie pressed her palm to the table, jaw clenched. She fought. Ryder exhaled sharply. They took her clean. They knew what they were doing. Bull leaned in. "Look at the glove," he muttered. "Not biker, not street. Military private. Contracted." Dale nodded. It matched the man watching them outside council, a clean badge under a coat, the kind who didn't bother hiding authority. Whoever grabbed her, Dale said, wasn't freelance. Rain always kept a failsafe, a secondary cloud backup, invisible to anyone except her and Dale. He opened the archive now. A single file waited. A key icon. Timestamp 2 minutes before her phone died. GPS soft ping. Warehouse district. Outside county jurisdiction. A single line tagged onto the data. If they take me, follow the quiet road. She'd known. She'd prepared. Dale closed the laptop. Mount up. The van was found behind a shuttered hardware store, one of those places that died slowly over the years. Its signage faded into something ghost-like. The lot was gravel littered with broken pallets and rusting nails. The van door was still warm. Jessie checked the interior with a flashlight. No blood, she said. They kept her intact. Means they want something, Ryder added. Means she's alive, Bull corrected. Dale opened the glove box. A single item lay inside a key card. White, embossed, clean, corporate. Rain's handprint smeared faintly across it. Dale lifted it with care. The texture was smooth cold. He'd seen that kind before: private security, heavy funding, government-adjacent contracts. Ryder ran a quick search. Owned by a shell company in Houston, he said. Building on the north edge. No business signage. No public records. Jessie cracked her knuckles. So we knock. Bull snorted. We break. No, Dale said quietly. We walk in. The others turned toward him. If they planned for noise, he said, we give them quiet. The building stood gray and unmarked, floodlights casting hard shadows along its perimeter. Cameras rotated silently across the roofline. Every inch of it screamed sanctioned authority. Every inch of it underestimated them. Dale swiped the key card. The lock clicked. Doors opened. Inside, the hallway smelled of industrial cleaner and metal vents pumping cold air. Rows of unmarked doors stretched ahead. A guard appeared at the end of the corridor, tall, startled hand halfway to the radio. Ryder crossed the distance in 2 strides and pinned him gently against the wall with a forearm. Lie down, he said calmly. Hands visible. Jessie set a cup of vending machine coffee beside him. Stay human, she told him. They moved deeper. Dale listened not to footsteps but to rhythm. The building hummed with electricity. Doors sealed tight. Something mechanical droned 2 floors up. Then a knock. Soft, patterned, familiar. Bull shoved open the nearest door. Rain sat on the floor, wrists bruised but free hair, messy lips, split eyes bright with defiance. You're late, she said. Jessie knelt beside her. You okay? Rain smirked. They tried questions. I tried silence. Dale lifted her gently. Let's go. They didn't run. They walked out the front, past stunned staff, frozen at their terminals, past monitors, still blinking, past men who didn't understand yet that power didn't always win. Rain paused at the reception desk. She placed the key card on the counter, then pressed her bloody palm beside it slow enough to stain the surface. One word beneath, written in sharp marker strokes: enough. By nightfall, the building went dark. Files vanished. The shell company dissolved, and somewhere a prosecutor picked up a phone and stopped breathing for 5 long seconds. Back at the garage, the sign buzzed softly, the smell of machine grease grounding the air. Isla handed Rain a steaming cup of coffee, no questions asked. The others hovered nearby. Dale leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Rain looked up at him, eyes tired but burning. They wanted me quiet, she said. Dale nodded. They don't get what they want. Outside, the night felt bigger than usual, not dangerous, expectant. The kind of quiet that came before someone pushed back. And Dale knew they would. and he knew the hawks would be ready. The storm didn't break, it stretched. Days slipped into each other under a sky the color of bruised steel. The roads stayed wet, the air stayed cold, and the town stayed, watched. Dale felt it first. Not in anything dramatic, not a raid or an arrival. Just in small things, the sheriff's sudden silence, the way some townsfolk waved a little too quickly, the unfamiliar sedan parked too long across from the diner. Sherry felt it when a reporter showed up at the shelter, asking how she vetted rescues, questions no outsider should have known to ask. Ela felt it when a health inspector returned for a third follow-up, this time with a photographer whose hands shook like someone had told him to get proof, not truth. But Dale truly knew something was shifting the night he stepped out back behind the garage and found Ryder staring at a smoldering cigarette on the ground, still warm, still burning. Ryder wasn't smoking tonight. Someone was standing right here, he said, watching. Dale crouched, touching the remaining ash. The wind hadn't scattered it yet. That meant minutes, maybe less. He stood slowly, eyes tracking the dark edges of the alley. Someone was hunting them with patience, the kind that came with credentials. The next day, the man from the street lamp returned, only this time without binoculars. He walked into the county office wearing a windbreaker too clean for rural Texas and carried a worn briefcase stuffed with a thick file. He knocked on the state prosecutor's door. Dale wasn't there, but Rain watched the feed. One building over, she had a friend who owed her a favor, and municipal cameras were easy. The investigator didn't storm or posture. He talked quietly, professionally, tapping the folder on the prosecutor's desk like it was a loaded weapon. Rain relayed each motion in real time. "He's not here to arrest," she murmured. "He's here to build a case." Jesse, leaning over her shoulder, asked against who. Rain zoomed in as the man flipped open the file. The photographs on the table were chilling in their precision. A freeze frame of the construction site, a shot of the motel door, halfway open the timestamp of the warehouse van. Evidence of every moment someone in power wanted to reinterpret. "He's cataloging," Rain whispered. "Not truth narrative." Dale watched her hands shake, not from fear but fury. The prosecutor leaned forward, eyes narrowing. She wasn't tired. She wasn't skeptical. She looked hungry. "Tell me what you've got," she said. The investigator opened his mouth, but Rain muted the feed. "We don't need to hear it." Dale turned away. "No," he said. "We need to stay ahead of it." The others heard the drop in his voice, felt the gravity, because the law wasn't coming at them with a siren, it was coming with paperwork, precision, and patience. The investigation didn't show up in uniform. It showed up in glances. A deputy lingering too long outside the diner door. A clerk at the county office suddenly unable to process paperwork. A neighbor avoiding eye contact while sweeping his porch. People wanted to believe the Hawks were good, but people also wanted to survive. And when the government stared at a small town, the small town tended to blink first. Bull noticed it inside the shop when a customer picked up his car early and left without saying a word. Jesse noticed it at the grocery store when someone she'd known since high school stepped into another aisle to avoid passing her. Dale didn't blame them. Fear made people shift their weight. Power made people choose a side. Then came the hit they didn't expect. Rain walked into the garage office with a stack of mail. "One's from the sheriff," she said. Dale opened it. A notice. Simple, cold, Oficial, the county is reviewing allegations of obstruction and interference related to your recent activities. Stand by for mandatory interviews. Bull swore under his breath. Ryder paced. Jesse threw a screwdriver onto the workbench so hard it rattled the wrenches. Rain sat quietly, fingers steepled beneath her chin. They want division, she said. If they separate us for interviews, they'll twist words. Dale folded the paper. Then we don't give them broken lines to pull on. Jesse looked at him sharply. You're thinking something. He nodded. We show up. Together. And if they try to split us, Ryder asked. They won't, Dale said. Not if they see what happens when we stand in one room. Rain smirked faintly. Public pressure, he shook his head. Presence. The interviews were scheduled for the following week, but the Hawks didn't wait that long to move. They walked into the sheriff's office, quiet, lined up, no aggression, no patch displays. Just boots, jackets, and an unspoken declaration that they weren't running and weren't bending. Dale stepped forward. We're ready, he said. The sheriff, gray, tired and torn down the middle by obligation and conscience, closed his eyes for a moment. State's watching, he said, voice low. They want this to stick. Truth sticks harder, Dale replied. The sheriff didn't disagree. But he looked like a man who knew truth wasn't what courts ran on. Before anything else could be said, a deputy rushed in with a folder. He whispered something to the sheriff, who stiffened. The sheriff opened the folder, scanned, then looked at Dale with something closer to dread than anger. What now? Jesse asked. The sheriff leaned back, rubbing his temples. Witness statements, he said. Anonymous. Several. Rain narrowed her eyes. Anonymous is convenient. Anonymous is dangerous, the sheriff corrected. He slid the folder across the table. Inside were typed pages, alleging intimidation, coercion, and excessive presence. Not one had a name. Not one had a date. Fabricated. Designed. Weaponized. Dale shut the folder. Whoever wrote those, he said, never met us. Ryder cracked his neck. What's the plan, boss? Dale stood. Someone wants a war fought on paper, he said. But wars don't get won in offices. Rain tilted her head. Then, where Dale answered with the calm certainty that always came before the storm, on the road. Always on the road. He pushed open the office door. Cold wind swept in sharp electric, promising trouble coming fast. The kind you didn't hide from. The kind you rode straight into. The state office smelled like cold paper and fluorescent fatigue, the kind of place where truth went to suffocate under forms and signatures. Dale hated it the moment he stepped inside. Too clean, too bright, too controlled. He and the Hawks stood in the lobby as one line, quiet, steady, unmovable. Rain at his left, Jesse at his right. Ryder and Bull behind them all, in clean jackets, no patches. Their presence alone shifted the air. A receptionist swallowed hard when she saw them. Interviews, she asked. Review, Dale corrected. We won't be split. She nodded without meeting his eyes and buzzed them through. The interview room was smaller than expected. Tight walls. No windows. One camera in the corner blinking a red dot like a slow heartbeat. A metal table bolted to the floor. 2 chairs. A trap disguised as compliance. The DA's representative, gray suit again, hair pinned, tight smile clipped, sat waiting with a neat stack of files in front of her. Only one of you is required at a time, she said. All of us, Dale answered. She looked up sharply. That's not procedure. Neither are anonymous statements, Dale replied. A crack formed in her expression, thin, brittle. Fine, she said, gesturing stiffly. Sit. They didn't sit. Dale set a small cloth pouch on the table. The woman frowned. "What is that?" He loosened the string and tipped the contents out. USB drives. 3 of them, each labeled by date, each with metadata engraved on the housing. Rain's backup archive. The woman blinked at the cold shine of metal. "What is this evidence of?" Dale didn't answer. He clicked open the first drive, connecting it to the room's computer without asking for permission. The screen filled with a folder, Motel Ledger Chain of Custody, time-stamped video clips, photographs, caseworker signatures, 2 agency seals. The DA rep inhaled sharply. "Where did you get these?" she demanded. "From the sources that should have called you first," Dale said. He opened the second drive. Construction yard labeled with time and date stamps stitched directly onto the feed. The wall of missing kid flyers. The man's confession, mumbled, cornered, uncoached, captured through Rain's enhanced audio filter. The woman's jaw tightened, sweat beaded at her hairline. "This footage was obtained illegally," she snapped. Jesse stepped forward. "Illegally is letting a kid vanish because paperwork moved slow. Or because someone didn't want it moving at all," Rain added, voice calm but sharp as wire. The third drive was the one that changed the temperature of the room. Rest stop abduction raw feed and path trace. Multiple camera angles Rain had recovered. GPS breadcrumbs. The van. The gloved hand pulling Rain out of frame. And then her return file, a silent recording of the building hallway, where she was held, showing nothing but doors closing in sequence, the shadow of a uniformed man passing by. The DA rep paled. "This building," she whispered. "Yes," Dale said. "Yours." Silence layered itself thick as frost. Her breath trembled. Papers shook under her fingers. "You understand," she said slowly, "that if this goes public, it implicates not just your attackers, but people above them." "That's the point," Dale said. Rain slid a written chain of custody log across the table, signed by Sherry, by agency staff, by the shelter director. "Clean, proper, ironclad." "We don't do things sloppy," Rain murmured. "We just don't do them slow." Jessie crossed her arms. "Go ahead. Say we faked it." The DA rep didn't. She couldn't. The signatures were too real. The timestamps too verifiable. The hallway echo in the footage too distinct to fabricate. And now she understood what the Hawks had really walked in with. Not testimony. A corner she couldn't escape. "Why bring this here?" she asked, voice cracking. "Because we're done with shadows," Dale said. "We want accountability." "Not attention." She stared at him, stunned not by aggression but by the sheer steadiness in his tone. "You're asking me," she whispered, "to take down my own people." "No," Dale said. "We're asking you to do your job." Rain closed the laptop. Ryder unplugged the drives. Bull lifted the pouch. The DA rep pressed both hands flat against the table, as if holding herself up. Then she reached slowly into her briefcase and pulled out a form official stamped at the top. A sealed motion. "Give me 48 hours, she said. "If this evidence holds, your investigation disappears. And theirs begins." Dale didn't smile, but something in his shoulders released just enough to be noticed only by those who knew him. 48, he said. They turned for the door. As they stepped out, the DA rep said quietly, almost to herself, "God help them if this is real." Rain paused, glancing back. "Oh, it's real," she said. "That's why they grabbed me. The woman swallowed. Rain added voice softer but with the weight of iron. And that's why we're still standing. Outside, the wind cut cold across the parking lot, carrying the scent of distant rain and heated asphalt. Dale closed the door behind them. Bull cracked his neck. You think she'll follow through? Ryder exhaled a slow plume of breath. She'd be stupid not to. Jesse smirked. Power never likes being embarrassed. Rain wiped dried blood from the corner of her lip. She's not embarrassed, she said. She's scared. Dale looked across the wide lot empty except for their bikes gleaming under the street lamp. He didn't raise his voice. We ride home, he said. And then we wait. Rain frowned. For what Dale gave a single steady answer, the fallout. They mounted up engines, growling to life one by one, echoing off the glass facade of the building behind them. They didn't look back. They didn't need to, because inside that room a storm had just changed direction, and it wasn't aimed at them anymore. The 48 hours didn't pass quietly. They passed like coiled wire, tight humming, ready to snap. Dale felt it the moment the Hawks stepped back into town. People watched them through half-closed blinds. Conversations died the second they walked into a room. Even the sheriff avoided eye contact when he fueled his cruiser. Something in the air carried a restless charge, as if the town knew something was coming and didn't know who it would crush first. Rain stayed behind the counter of the garage office most of the day, headphones on eyes flicking between 3 screens. Jessie helped Isla at the diner, her presence enough to make the bolder reporters keep their distance. Ryder ran deliveries. Bull watched the back lot, arms folded, expression unreadable. Dale waited. Not with fear, with certainty. When power felt the earth shifting under its feet, it always lunged before it fell. The first strike came at sunset. A dark SUV pulled into the shop's lot, tires crunching gravel. 2 suits stepped out. Not sheriff's deputies, not local at all. Their shoes were too shiny, their badges too polished, their faces too composed. Dale Harrow, the taller one, asked. Dale didn't bother confirming. He just watched the man's shoulders. Stiff, braced, nervous. We're here to escort you for further questioning, the man said. State's orders. No, Dale replied. The shorter man stepped forward. Failure to comply means you think you're dealing with people who scare easy, Jesse said from behind him, voice low and sharp. The men stiffened when they saw the others stepping out of the shadows, Ryder wiping grease from his hands, Bull cracking his knuckles, Rain lowering her headphones but not standing. We're not refusing, Dale said evenly. We're waiting for the call. What call? The taller man asked. The one that makes your orders vanish, Rain answered. The SUV engines idled, heat rising from the hood, lights flickering across the grimy windows of the shop. The suits hesitated too long, too obvious. Then the shorter one pressed his earpiece. He froze. His partner did the same. Both men exchanged a look that said everything. Stand down, the taller murmured to Dale, voice suddenly lacking confidence. This will be handled elsewhere. They got back in the SUV. Doors shut. Tires spat gravel. And they were gone. Jesse exhaled. There it is. Ryder smiled faintly. Domino 1. Dale didn't smile. He just said more coming. He was right. It broke wide the next morning. The DA's representative held a press conference on the courthouse steps. The entire town turned up, some out of anger, some out of fear, most out of curiosity. News vans lined the street. Cameramen stood on truck beds trying to get shots. Dale didn't stand in the crowd. He watched from the alley beside the diner, arms crossed, Rain beside him with her laptop half open. The woman approached the podium with a folder in hand, not thick, but heavy with meaning. Her posture wasn't confident. It was resolute. She adjusted the mic. A review of materials submitted this week, she began, has revealed substantial irregularities within a contracted enforcement group operating under state authority. A murmur rippled across the crowd. We have verified multiple breaches of protocol, she continued, including unauthorized detainment, falsified reports, and interference in ongoing child welfare investigations. Now people whispered. The deputies near the steps shifted uneasily. These actions were concealed through fabricated documentation, the woman said, and through attempts to redirect blame toward civilians. Another murmur, louder. The sheriff closed his eyes. The woman lifted the folder. I am issuing immediate suspension of all personnel connected to the warehouse facility specified in these statements. An internal audit begins today. Then she paused, a breath heavy enough to bend the moment, and the investigation into the local motorcycle group is dropped. The words fell like a hammer on stone. Gasps, relief, confusion, disbelief. Rain closed her laptop slowly. Jessie rubbed a hand down her face. Ryder let out a low whistle. Bull muttered, "About time." But Dale just watched the DA rep carefully. She wasn't finished. These events, she said, reflect a failure of oversight, one we intend to correct. Not applause. Not condemnation. Just the shift of power realigning itself, quiet, mechanical, unstoppable, now that the gears had been forced to turn. The suits from the SUV reappeared at the back of the crowd, now looking small, exposed, their badges suddenly meaningless in the morning light. Overreach always bent eventually, but it always bent violently. The courthouse emptied slow, like people weren't sure if the danger had truly passed. Dale and the others gathered beside the alley. You did it, Rain said softly. No, Dale answered. They did it to themselves. Ryder nudged him. Still took your push. Push, Jessie scoffed. We shoved their whole narrative down the stairs. Bull grinned. Twice, Rain typed something on her laptop. Online chatters shifting, she said. People talking about the warehouse, about the missing kids, about the state's shadow unit. Good, Jessie said. Let them talk. No, Dale replied. Let them see. He stepped out of the alley into the thinning crowd. Faces turned, some grateful, some wary, all changed. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Sometimes victory didn't look like a parade. Sometimes it looked like broken narratives and people finally opening their eyes. That night the sky cleared for the first time in a week. Stars sharpened overhead, bright against the dark horizon. The air felt washed clean. Dale drove out past the ridge, with the others trailing behind, engines' loud headlights cutting long white blades through the night. They reached the overlook where the road dropped into a valley of old oil fields. Dale parked, killed the engine, and stepped into the stillness. Jessie came up beside him. Feels different tonight, she said. It is, Dale replied. What now? He stared out at the horizon, the endless stretch of black ribbon highway, the faint shimmer of heat still rising from the earth. Now, he said, we finish what they started. Jessie nodded. Ryder planted his boots beside them. Bull folded his arms. Rain pulled her hoodie tighter around her shoulders. The wind carried the faint scent of dust oil and night-blooming sage. Dale breathed it in. Overreach had collapsed. But justice wasn't done. Not yet. Not until the last truth was dragged into the light. Winter crept in slow, not with snow, but with a dry cold that settled into the bones of the town. The kind of cold that whispered through the cracks of old buildings and turned every metal surface sharp to the touch. Dale felt it each morning when he lifted the shop's bay door, air crisp enough to sting his throat, light pale and thin. Life didn't return to normal. It simply shifted. People stopped watching the hawks from behind curtains. They started nodding again, slow at first, then with something like recognition. Gratitude stayed quiet, tucked inside small gestures, a thermos left on the shop counter, a basket of rolls on Ila's doorstep, a gas card slipped anonymously under the diner's register. Sherry's shelter filled quickly. Not with chaos, but with the steady hum of people finding their footing again. Candace worked the front desk on weekends, her posture straightening more each day. Levi learned how to fix a flat tire in the alley beside the garage, proudly showing Dale his grease-stained hands. Dale noticed the changes without calling attention to them. That wasn't his way. He fixed engines, tightened bolts, built things that other people depended on. Quiet repairs. Quiet good. But even quiet good carried echoes. The courthouse finally posted the ruling on a cold Tuesday morning. Guilty on all counts. The man who'd tried to warp his own violence into a better story, whose lies had nearly crushed other lives on their way down, was sentenced in a courtroom full of people who didn't flinch this time. Sherry stood. Candace stood. Levi held his mother's hand tight. Dale didn't attend. None of the Hawks did. It wasn't their place. They weren't the victory. They were the road that carried people to it. Later that afternoon, Ela handed Dale a sealed envelope dropped off by a courier. No sender. Inside was a single line on plain paper, "Thank you for giving truth its teeth." Dale tucked it into the drawer beneath the register beside two old bike keys and a worn photo of better days. Night settled early that week, pressing the sky down in heavy sheets. At the diner, the fundraiser for the shelter brought nearly the entire town in farmhands, teachers, retirees, even the sheriff. Ela kept the coffee flowing. Jesse handled the grill with impossible calm. Ryder played music from his phone, the sound tinny but earnest. Bull manned the door, murmuring greetings like a gentle boulder. Kids from the shelter handed out hand-drawn thank-you cards. One boy, maybe 8, shy and small, gave Dale a picture of 6 motorcycles beside a tiny house with lit windows. On the back, he'd written, "You find people, like you found my mom." Dale's chest tightened. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He simply folded the drawing carefully and slipped it into his jacket. Later, after the diner lights dimmed and the last guests drifted home with full bellies and warmer spirits, Dale stepped out back alone. Cold air bit at his lungs, his breath came out in pale clouds. The sky was clear enough to see the thin line of stars stretching above the ridge. For a moment the quiet felt too big. Jessie joined him, offering a cigarette. He shook his head. She lit her own and leaned on the railing beside him. "You thinking too loud again," she murmured. He didn't answer right away. The frost glimmered faintly on the gravel. Somewhere far away, a lone truck rumbled along the highway. "Every win leaves someone behind," Dale finally said. "Someone we didn't get to." "That's not on you," Jessie said. "Maybe not." He rubbed a hand across the back of his neck. "Still feels heavy." She took a slow drag smoke drifting past her cheek. "Rain once told me something. Said we don't fix the world. We just make it bleed slower." She flicked ash over the rail. "Maybe that's all any of us can do." A long silence stretched easy this time. Then Dale nodded. Quiet, steady. We keep going." Winter tightened its grip, but the town didn't close in on itself the way it used to. The shelter lights stayed on late. The diner kept a pot of soup warm. The garage never locked its side door until Dale knew every bike, every car, every person made it home safe. One night a man left a note on Ila's counter. "My sister is alive because someone finally showed up. No name, no details, just truth left in pen. For every closed wound, another opened. But fewer stayed unseen." A week later, Dale found himself riding alone through the outskirts, the fields brittle, the soil hard, the cold, knife-sharp in the wind. He reached the ridge by instinct more than intention. The overlook stretched below, wide and quiet hills dipped in frost. He parked, turned off the engine, and let silence take its shape around him. Footsteps crunched on gravel. Rider, bull, Jesse, Rain. They hadn't followed him, just arrived the same way he did, carried by the road. Ryder shoved his hands in his pockets. "Can't sleep either," No Dale said. Bull nodded toward the valley. "Big world. Bigger shadows," Jesse added. Rain kicked a pebble over the edge. "But hey," she said softly, "we're still here." Dale looked at them, his people. Not flawless, not saints, not law. Just steady hands in a world that let too many things fall. "Yeah," he said, "we are." Wind pulled through the dry grass, crisp and cold. The stars sharpened above them. Justice wasn't a finish line. It was a road. A long one. A quiet one. The kind you didn't walk away from just because the night grew colder. Dale tightened his gloves, the leather creaking softly. "Ride back?" Jesse asked. "In a minute," he said. They stood together on the ridge, 5 silhouettes against the winter sky breath, hanging like thin white ghosts in the air. Because sometimes poetic justice wasn't a headline. It wasn't applause or a ruling or a speech. Sometimes it was simpler, a town safer than before, doors that didn't close as fast, kids who finally slept through the night, and people who didn't look away anymore. When Dale finally spoke, it wasn't loud, roads waiting. And they followed engines, sparking to life headlights, cutting clean lines through the dark. Justice carried forward 1 quiet mile at a time. In the end, this story isn't about heroes or headlines. It's about ordinary people choosing not to look away when someone else's world is falling apart. It reminds us that justice isn't only delivered in courtrooms or through the hands of officials. Often it begins in the quiet choices we make when no one is watching. Many communities learn the hard way that silence can be just as harmful as any wound, and that evil triumphs when good people do nothing isn't just a saying, it's a map of how pain spreads. The Hawks show us that decency doesn't require perfection, only presence. That even flawed, weathered people can draw a line in the dirt and say, "Not here, not today." This story asks us to examine the places in our own lives where we've stayed silent out of fear, habit, or exhaustion. It asks us to recognize toxic relationships for what they are, to stand by those who whisper for help, and to remember that every act of courage, no matter how small, pushes back against the darkness. And it reminds older audiences especially that dignity is not lost with age. If anything, wisdom sharpens our ability to see what really matters. As the old American saying goes, true gold doesn't fear the fire. People too reveal their worth when things burn hottest. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear your reflections. Share your thoughts, your experiences, or your own quiet acts of courage in the comments. If you found meaning here, hit like to support the channel and subscribe so you don't miss the next tale full of grit, heart, and hard-earned truth. Wishing you warmth, clarity, and a peaceful night after all the noise.